I talked about using one light and creating shadows. Now, if your light source is very, very bright, it's gonna create a very dark shadow too. So how do you get those shadows and or control the light on the shadows? You might like some shadow, but you don't want it too dark. It will look maybe too contrasty for you. So what you can do is use a reflector. A reflector is a great low-cost way of kind of using a second light, but just using a reflector instead. And so I use the reflector is I bring light into the shadows so I can control the strength of the shadow. So I have full control. Okay, so I'm gonna go into it now. I'm gonna use my main light here, but I'm gonna kind of do more of a split lighting look where she's looking at me, I have the light off to the side, it's creating a darker shadow on this other side, and I'm gonna bring my reflector in to minimize that light. Okay, and so you can see as I bring this reflector in, that shadow is reduced. We are gonna go into the dark studio now, and so you can see that. I'm gonna pull this away. As you can see, I'm using my one light, but I have a lot of shadows on this side. So what I could do, so if you turn your nose this way a bit, you can still see that shadow here. Now, that may be too strong, especially if this light is real bright. So what I can do is with a reflector, you're gonna see a big difference of how it can also soften that shadow and open up that shadow a bit, but you can still see the shadow. And so you can control that with the reflector. I'm using a basic silver side reflector, which the silver side actually reflects the most light and it keeps the light white. And so in this case, I want to use white light here. And so I'm using the silver side because it gives me the most light reflection. And now I can create a great shot, and I'm controlling my shadows with the reflector. And now I'm in full control of my situation by just using a reflector to open up and put some light into the shadows and control it to my exact desire and the kind of look I want. Let's use something different with the reflector. Let's try something a little bit more dramatic. So I'm gonna do side lighting. And what I'm looking for here is that shadow here, as you can see, right? But what happens when you do this type of lighting, especially if it's dramatic here, what happens is I got a great illumination here, but the hair seems to fall off into complete darkness, especially if your light is real close to your subject. So I'm going to take a before shot here. So I've got that light and it looks really dramatic, which is cool, but I don't see any hair. So what I can do now is bring this reflector in to light up that backside of the hair. And now it gets me a really nice, you can start to see that light on the other side of that reflector. Awesome. Good. Can I have you just lean back a little bit, Charlene? Yeah, let's try some of that. That looks good right there. And now I can see the hair, which is great. And I'm using constant light, so I'm not afraid to take multiple frames per second just to get me that. And how about look this way just a bit? Turn your nose a little bit more towards me. Beautiful. A little bit more. Right there. Awesome. Put your hands down. Good. Look that way. And let's create a shape with your elbows. Yep, there you go. Awesome. And when I shoot, I also shoot portrait, which is up and down, but I also shoot landscape. I just shoot it both ways, just in case. And what you want to do too is shoot different angles. So look this way, good. And sometimes you never know what angle is going to look good. So I always shoot lower and higher. And let's do, I'm going to move this light around. And I'm going to demonstrate just shooting it. Even though you have the same lighting setup, you can shoot it at different angles to give you a different look. Okay? And so, perfect right there. Look at me. Ooh, that looks great. And bring this hand up. Actually, yeah, that's good. That looks fine right there. Good. Now what I'm going to do is give her more of a hero look. Turn your face this way. Let's see. Nose towards that light there, but look back at me. And I'm going to shoot at a little bit lower angle. So when you shoot lower, if you have your subject lean into you a little bit this way, it corrects the perspective a bit. Put your chin down just a tad. There you go. And it gives a different look. Then you can also have your subject not look at you, but also look into the light. Look right there. Good. And then get closer this way and look straight into this light right here. As long as you can see those great catch lights in her eyes, I love shooting at a lower angle while they're looking at that light, because then they can put their chin up a bit and look straight into that light and put it down. Good. Turn your nose to the light a little bit more. Beautiful. Great. Those are two ways of using a reflector. I'm going to give you the third way, which we talked about, is using the light from the top. And so when you use a reflector, it's called a clamshell lighting, because you have light from the top and the bottom kind of creating a clamshell. So I'll show you that example right now. Using light from above, a lot of times the light is so high you don't get a catch light in the eye, or it gets too dark right here because the light is actually coming down. So what a popular technique is to get some light from the bottom, but you don't need another light. All you need is a reflector. And so you can use this reflector to get some great uplight and create amazing catch lights in the eyes and control the shadow. So here we do have the light. Now let's go to the studio lighting setup. All right, perfect. Now, Robert, if you can just raise your light just a little higher, right there, perfect. And let's see, Charlene, get your hands somewhere above the reflector. Perfect. Anywhere? Beautiful. Now you can see that this reflector is creating an awesome catch light, but also eliminating the shadows on her body, but I still get some shadows on the cheeks here, which really create an awesome image. So you don't want such lighting where you're eliminating these shadows, but for me, because I want to show the depth and the shape of my subject, I need those shadows. And so this way, I'm getting the shadows, I'm controlling them with this reflector here, and also getting some great uplight and catch light in the eye.